Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you are on the area, we will always welcome you to come to our church so we can praise and worship God together and enjoy each other's fellowship. Last week, we have concluded the Joshua series. Today, Dara would like to have a follow-up on Joshua 24. Dara will preach about the importance of our home. It begins from our home. This is Dara Chan.
You know, I'm not sure how many of you are renting, how many of you actually own a house here. But when you actually own a house and something goes wrong with the house, it's a lot of issue, right? And it's a lot of issue. And especially when you have something like a leaking roof. Because I'm not sure if you're aware, but I have never thought about this until I actually own a home. Because before, my dad used to do all the maintenance. And he used to worry about the gutter, he used to worry about the leaking roof and all that kind of stuff. And now that I own my own home, I realize that I can't send my wife up to clean the gutter. I can't send my wife to fix the roof. I have to do it. And so I realized, oh my goodness, you know, like we had a leaking roof a couple of years ago. And the funny thing about water is that water is very, very hard to detect, right? And there's ways to do it, but when it goes, it just leaks and runs everywhere. So we had that issue, and then we had a tree with a lot of branches going into our gutter. So our gutter was filled with leaves and it overflows, that kind of stuff, and it overflows outside. And so the other day I had to get a ladder and climb up and, you know, trying to get it out. And, you know, my ladder bends a bit. So I woke up and I was trying to calculate the amount of force on the ladder. I'm like, man, is this going to hold my weight? But luckily my neighbor, again, my good neighbor, said, hey, you want to borrow my ladder? My ladder's better. So I managed to borrow his ladder and managed to clean up all the leaves on the roof and all that kind of stuff. Well, today, you know, last week, even though we ended the Joshua sermon series, today I just want to add a precursor or an incursor to that. My title of my sermon today is It Begins in the Home. Everything begins at home, yeah? And for many of us who at the moment are single, or many of us who have yet to have kids and in a relationship, you realize that the home is very, very important. Very, very important. And today, I just want to highlight that our home is where everything begins. Because our home is where, you know, we grow up. It's where we learn our values from our parents. And maybe some of us have not had the best in terms of growing up. But I just want to highlight to you that even though maybe your past has some issues, I think we can reset by the grace of God and change our future and our destiny.
Well, everyone, we have a little bit of technical difficulties, something wrong with the microphone. So I'm going to read from Joshua 24, verse 14 and 15. Verse 14, now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worship beyond Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Verse 15, but if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me, meaning Joshua, and my household, meaning Joshua's household, we will serve the Lord.
Yeah. But he wandered through the desert with the Israelites. So let's just say, for example, he was 20, right? How long would the Israelite wander in the desert for? 40 years, right? So let's say he was in his mid-20s, when he started to conquer the land. Sorry, when he wandered for 40 years, so he'll be 65 when they entered into Canaan. So at 60 or 65 or thereabouts, he took on this mantle of leadership. So now he's probably around 100 or so years old as he was towards the twilights of his years. Now, we know that in the next few verses, towards the end of chapter 24, Joshua died when he was 110. He said that I'm well advanced in years. So he was 110 when he passed into glory. So he would be round about now, about 108, 109. So this is basically his last words that he gives to the people of Israel. So he started off by telling the people about his life story. He started telling people about how God delivered him, how God delivered the Israelites. Friends, the first thing about exalting God is that we need to use our voices. We need to use our voices. Joshua, in previous verses, talked about he used his voice to exalt God. He says in verse 2 to 4, he talks about God's faithfulness to the patriarch. So he gathered all the leaders of Israel. So at this time, there would have been about 3 million people, yeah? But that's just impractical to gather 3 million people. So what he did was he gathered all the leaders together and he challenged them. But before he challenged them, he exalted God first. He used his voice. He said God's faithfulness to the patriarchs or his ancestors in verses 2 to 4. In verses 5 to 7, he talks about God's faithfulness, about delivering them from Egypt. It talks about in verses 7 to 10 about God's faithfulness in the wilderness. And in verses 11 to 13, Joshua used his voice to exalt God's faithfulness when they conquered the promised land, about Canaan. Joshua talks about the blessings and the grace of God. In verses 13, Joshua said that God gave the land of Canaan, in which they did not work, they did not have to toil, they did not have to build up. God gave them vineyards to plant, at which they did not plant. So basically Joshua uses his voice to exalt God. Friends, at home and in our house, we need to use our voice as well to exalt God. Okay? Sometimes in the morning, we wake up and we say, "Oh God, it's morning." Or do we say, "Oh God, it's morning. Yes, it's morning. I'm here to take on the day." I know that some of you are not morning people. I am very much a morning person, yeah? So by 9 o'clock, I'm on autopilot basically. So I'm very easy for me to, yes, here I am. I'm ready. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, I'm ready to take on the world. But I know that some of us are not morning people. But, we have to use our voice to really exalt and honor God. In verses 14, Joshua says that now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. So our voice at home speaks volume, how we exalt God, how we glorify him. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 5 to 6, for what we preach is not of ourselves, but Jesus Christ our Lord, and ourselves as your servant for Jesus. For God's sake, let light shine out of darkness and give us the light of knowledge of glory of God displayed in the face of Christ. In Romans chapter 10, verses 13, it says that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. So there again, anyone who calls, as in they proclaim or they use their voice to call upon the name of the Lord. So using our voice is very, very important. I know that sometimes we say that, hey, we can proclaim or we can preach the gospel through our lives, through our examples, the way we live our lives, right? That's true in one sense, but there's also another impact factor as well, is we actually need to speak the gospel. We need to use our voice to challenge people, right? There's both parts to it. There's living by example, but also by using our voice as well. So the Bible talks a lot about how we proclaim God through the use of our voice. So first thing is our voice, yeah? Second is our values. At home, we have to exalt God with our values, okay? And it's interesting because our kids can watch us and they know the values that we hold. So our values are very, very important, okay? This is what Joshua said. Throw away or put away the gods. So Joshua was highlighting to the people of Israel at the time. You would think, right, after all these battles, that they would have already thrown away the gods before. But you know what they say? It's easier to put the boy in the city, but it's very hard to take the city from the boy. Or in another way, it's very easy to put someone in a different place, but it's very, very hard to change their behavior or their culture. Yeah? So Joshua knows that even though the Israelites have entered the promised land, right, it's very, very hard because they have to change from the inside. So changing places actually does not necessarily change what they think on the inside. Okay? I think that thing about the city, I heard it said another way. It's easier to put the country person in the city. It's very hard to take the country out of the person. You know what I mean? So Joshua asked the people, put away their gods. So there's 3 types of gods that Joshua mentioned. The gods of the Egyptian. So put away the gods of the Egyptian. Okay? So the Egyptian were basically pantheistic. They worship all the sun god, the moon god, all these kinds of gods, right? So basically the Egyptian god represents a god of heritage. The heritage that the Israelites have inherited from their ancestors. So the gods of the Egyptian. The second god is the god of the Babylonians. So the Israelites were worshipping gods of the Euphrates, the god of Babylonian. So basically the god of the Babylonians were basically the god of culture, the culture that they had to worship, okay? So the god of heritage, the god of culture, and lastly, the god of the Ammonites. So basically the Ammonites had the Baal, they worship Baal, which is god of the intellect. They worship Molech, which is the god of pleasure. They worship Mammon, which is the god of possession. And Ashtaroth, which is basically the god of infertility. So these are all the gods that are present. And Joshua mentioned these 3 things, right? The god of heritage, the god of culture, and the god of society. So basically he's just trying to say, hey, instead of worshipping these gods, right? Small g, choose big God, big G, the one and true God, right? It's interesting, I heard this story one time about this child who put his hand into this expensive vase, this Chinese vase, right? And the child was crying, ah, right? Must be a toddler like my daughter or something like that. And the parents were flabbergasted, and the uncles and aunties were flabbergasted as well. They're trying to yank it out of the child, like pull it out, right? They said, oh my goodness, the child's hand is stuck inside this vase, right? And we can't pull it out. We can't pull the child's hands out. As try as they can, they don't want to damage the vase, but 2, they don't want to ruin the child's joints as well, right? So they tried the best they can, and they just couldn't get out the child's hand out of the vase, yeah? They tried the best they can. So after a few hours, they just gave up, all right? And they said, all right, we got to do it. We got to break the vase, It's expensive, we know, but we have to break the vase. And when they broke the vase, they saw the child's hand clinching onto something. And inside the child's hand was 50 cents. The child was not able to let go of what was inside the child's hand. Friends, here Joshua was challenging the people, the values that they hold. They need to let go of whatever they're clinging on to, whether it would be the heritage, the good old days of their gods, whether it's the culture that's influenced them. He challenged the people about values. Let go. What we spend the most on our time reveals not only our priorities, but also our values, yeah? What we spend most on our time not only reveals our priorities, but also our values. That's something for you to think about, right? In Matthew chapter 6, verses 21, Jesus says that for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So guys, if you're spending a lot of time on EPL, I know. There's voices, values, and lastly, visual. What we see at home, yeah? Joshua said, serve the Lord. Joshua says in verses 24, 27, see, he said to the people, The stone will be a witness. Okay? So in Psalm 19 verses 1 to 4, the Word of God says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The sky proclaim His work of His hands. So what we see at home talks about how we exalt God as well. So friends, I just want to encourage you, use our voice at home, show our values, and use visuals to encourage one another. So that's the thing. First point is exalt. Second point is exhort. Exhort, right? So what does exhort mean? Again, exhort is not a word that we use very often in our workplace. My manager doesn't comes to me, I exhort you, Dara. He'd probably say, get it done. Otherwise, you know what I mean? So exhort is very much a word that's used perhaps maybe in religious circles, but it talks about how it's to encourage strongly, to admonish, to advise, to appeal, or to make an urgent argument or to appeal. So basically Joshua is appealing to the people of Israel. He's to the leaders. He's encouraging them. He's appealing to them. So this is what he says. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, that's weird, isn't it? How is serving the Lord seems undesirable to the people, yeah? Choose for yourself this day whom you will serve. He's basically challenging them. Choose for yourself this day whom you will serve. So the choices are whether the small g's, the gods, your ancestor worship beyond the Euphrates, the gods of the Amorites, whose lands are you living now? So basically he's giving the people, the leaders, options. Choose today whom you will serve. Friends, you and I, especially in a well-developed country like Australia, we live in a world of choices. We are empowered to choose, right? We choose our toothpaste, our deodorants, our cars, our house, our jobs, our lifestyle, our friends, our church. The list goes on and on and on. So first thing is to exalt God. Second thing is that to exhort. But lastly, example. Example. So Joshua says, you guys make a choice, but the example he gave was, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Yeah? Joshua made a choice. It is the power of the single choice that he made. As for me and my house. See, in order for us to work, we think that we have to change processes. We think that we have to change people, a group of people. But you see, what God does is He works through individuals. In order to change a community, God changes a person first. That person will affect the community, then that community will affect the culture and the nation. God works through individuals. Joshua made a stand. He says that as for me, so he made a choice. He said, he led by example. He said, look, you guys can choose whatever you want. This, regardless of the popular opinion, regardless of the peer pressure, I, Joshua said, will make a choice. He made a choice individually, and through that choice, he influenced his family. He influenced his family as well. The personal choice that he made had an influence on his family. Daniel chapter 1 verse 8, Daniel says that Daniel purposed in his heart that he would defile himself with the portions of the king's meat. Daniel made a choice. Joshua made a choice. He chose to go, perhaps not the popular opinion, but the choice that he is convicted with. That's the power of choice, the personal choice that he made. As for me and my house, it begins in the home. So why did Joshua say, as for me and my wife? Why didn't Joshua say, as for me and the tribe that I'm in? Why didn't he say, as for me and my house? God instituted the family in the book of Genesis. It was Pope John Paul who says, as the family goes, so goes the nation, and so goes the whole world that we live. As the family goes, so goes the nation, and so goes the whole world that we live. Family is the building block of society, of the nation. If you want to destroy culture, if you want to destroy a nation, if you want to destroy a society, you destroy the family, destroy the household. That's why Joshua understood that his house is so important. Friends, it begins in the home. Why is our home so important? Because through our home, God teaches us about His nature. It says about the relationship between a parent and their children. It's like a relationship between God the Father and God the Son and God and His children. So God teaches us family about His nature through family, alright? God teaches us about His gospel through the family as well. God tells us that when we are justified by faith with Jesus, we are adopted into His family. So that's important. And also, lastly, God teaches us about the church through the family. Peter calls the church the family of God, right? Paul refers to the church as God's household. So friends, family or household is so important. So lastly, the household has to lead by example.
I hope you are blessed by that video. If you are in the area, we will always welcome you to our church. Please click like, subscribe, the bell notification icon, and follow us on social media. In the meantime, bye for now, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless you.